This was the moment the Southport killer's father told a taxi driver not to take his son to the high school he'd been expelled from because he believed he wanted to set it on fire. But just a week later, Axel Rudakabana takes a taxi to a Taylor Swift dance class and kills 3 little girls. Elsie Dot Stancombe, Bebe King and Alice Aguiar. Today, Alphonse Rudakabana told the inquiry he was sorry he'd lost the courage to save the little angels who died that day by not reporting his son. A year before the attack, he intercepted the delivery of a machete but didn't tell the police. I regret that I didn't tell the police because if I did, the 29th wouldn't have happened. They would have come and checked everything in his room. The inquiry heard how Alphonse failed to tell mental health services about any of the weapons his son had, despite finding poison in his room and a bow and arrow under his bed. A week before the attack, he messaged his wife saying our child needs to be protected. They were scared of what he could do, but they were also scared of him being locked up or taken into care. And Axel's mother, Letitia Mazairi, told the inquiry, there are many things Alphonse and I wish we had done differently, anything that might have prevented this horrific event of the 29th of July 2024. For our failure, we are profoundly sorry. But today the families of all 3 girls made clear their complete disdain for their excuses. In a statement, Elsie's parents, Jenny and David Stancombe, described how the attackers' parents should be held to account for what they allowed to happen. They knew how dangerous he was, and yet they stayed silent. Alice's parents, Alex and Sergio Aguiar, described this tragedy as not inevitable. It was the result of neglect by those who should have known better. And Bebe's parents, Lauren and Ben King, added that what they were struggling to comprehend was not just their failures then, but their failures now. To acknowledge, to take responsibility, to face up to what they allowed to happen.
The families want disciplinary action, they want sackings. This can't be allowed to ever occur again.
Despite the day of the attack being the first time he'd left the house in 2 years, neither parent stopped him. And early next year, the chair of this public inquiry will publish his report into how and why an attack like this could happen. Emmy Welch, News at 10, Liverpool.
There is no doubting, of course, just how shocked the country was by the murders of those 3 little girls at that Taylor Swift summer holiday dance class. It's one of the reasons that the number of referrals of young people to the government's anti-terrorism prevent programme has hit a new record high. Rachel has been examining the figures for us. Rachel.
Thanks, Julian. I think what is perhaps most notable from Prevent's figures is the increased vigilance you can see happening in the wake of that horrific attack. Now, whether it was concerns being raised by teachers, police officers or the community, there was a 34% increase in referrals from the July when that attack happened right through till March when the data ends compared to the same period the year before. And you can see that spike is really noticeable in January when that very public trial began. In all, a record total of almost 9,000 people were referred to the UK's counter-terror programme. That's an increase of 26%. Now, 10% of those referrals were for concerns around Islamist extremism. That's down 3% on the same year before. That's despite the fact that particular threat remains MI5's #1 priority. Now, there was also a notable rise in extreme right-wing referrals, up to 21%. That's up more than a third. And perhaps surprisingly, the data shows that 56% of all referrals were for people where no particular ideology was identified, although people in that group were far less likely to be judged as needing any further action. Now, there are other trends too. 89% of those referred were male. Of the cases that were taken further, 39% were just 11 to 15 years old. And the role of mental health is significant too. A third of Prevent referrals had at least one mental health condition or were neurodiverse. And then there is what looks like one alarming new development. Although only 5% of those who were referred without an obvious ideology had what's called a fascination with the extreme violence of mass casualty attacks, that category saw a whopping increase of 240% in just the last 3 months that the data was collected. And what senior figures in both security and policing are saying, Julie, is that that combination of people with no particular ideology, perhaps mental health issues too, and the continuing very toxic online culture means that this is something that they alone are simply not equipped to deal with.